Thank you for joining the Broadway Drumming 101 podcast with your host, Clayton Craddock.
Welcome to Broadway Drumming 101. My guest today is the incredible, legendary Pat Petrillo.
Peace and love. Peace and love. Man, I love your podcast, and I'm really thankful that we connected once again. And thanks for having me. We're gonna get into it a little bit.
What was your first musical memory?
My first musical memory, and I think we all have different influences. So my first musical memory was dropping a needle on the Beatles record, my brother's Beatles records. I have two much older brothers, and when they were out of the house, they left me records, and I would just, I would always hear him. He was in a garage band, and they'd always play Beatles stuff. And so, when I basically got into the Beatles, they were almost over by that time, by the time I was old enough to start playing. But I would just listen, just drop the needles and listen to the records. And before I even had a drum set, I just sat down and listened to the music and learned every verse and learned every lyric and let it all just, sink into me, into my, insides, and learn music that way. I guess school band was really big for me. So I was in, we had a jazz band in 4th and 5th grade. So there was always competitions to be in jazz band in 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade.
Wow.
So, I play stuff like Hawaii 5-0 and stuff like that, and Manhattan Beach and all this stuff. So, I'd gotten into, playing drum set just by listening to the Beatles. And then I also mentioned to you, I vividly remember the day that I went from Ringo to I think probably Jabbo in one day. I had heard music on the radio and in my neighborhood, et cetera. And I got on my bike and went down to the record store. I got my first James Brown 8-track Hot Pants. And I remember that day. And then I popped it in, and it just kept going and going and going and going. So I'm very happy I grew up, being a little boy at the time that I was, because the 60s, 70s music was great. Late 60s, mostly 70s music was great.
So you went from Tomorrow Never Knows to Hot Pants in like
absolutely
30 minutes.
Dude. Yeah. And still, because I had gotten into 8-tracks when I was old enough to start to get them. So I wasn't listening to the records as much as I started listening to 8-tracks. So I'd be just like popping them in and out, changing them up, So I literally, those are the drummers,
What was the thing that got you into playing drums?
I kind of grew up, like I said, my oldest brothers were out of the house by the time I was like 5 or whatever, so kind of grew up an only child in that way. And my mom wanted to get me involved in stuff. So there was a local drum corps in my neighborhood, parade corps. So she got me involved in that. So that was my lessons with my hands and my chops and stuff, learning rudiments, memorizing. And memorizing was good for me because I always played by ear anyway. By that time, I was just playing basic little beat stuff. I had a basic little drum set. And so, and I never really had lessons. My mom took me, she wanted to give me formal drum set lessons or regular drum set lessons outside of school. And I said, all right, I'll go, So we went, the guy had a little remote practice pad set up. He goes, okay, show me what you can do. And I was like, but this isn't real drums, But I just went, doing bats, ba-doom, doom, bats, ba-doom, bats, ba-doom, ba-doom, doom. I'm just playing, what I listened to. That was, I don't know, I was about 8. He looked at my mom. He's like, he doesn't really need lessons. I mean, and I wasn't into it. She was like, do you want to do it? I was like, nah, he doesn't have real drums. So she never signed me up.
Where'd you learn how to read?
Good question. Even better question. I couldn't read till I got to college, really. I could read basics, in drum corps back then, it was all, it was oral tradition. So you learned by rote.
Oh, wow.
So not much of stuff was written out. So we learned, here's this 8-bar phrase, play it back. And that's why my ears started, getting good at memorizing. So, school band, basic stuff, quarters, 8/16ths, through high school even. I could read a little bit, quarters, 8/16ths, no dotted rhythms, no syncopation, none of that. Basic stuff. When I got to college is when I really got into learning how to read even better, really learning how to read rhythmically and reading charts and, form and all that stuff. So, and I went to Morehead State University in Kentucky, and I had I'm from Jersey. So that was a bit of a change for me. So
why that school?
He recruited me. the instructor, Mr. Otis, Frank Otis, he saw my mom, actually. It's my mom again. Mom's always in there somewhere. I was in a drum corps at that time. By the time I was in my like 15, 16, I was in another local corps. And then I went on to the cadets from North Jersey, Garfield cadets at that time. And we were on tour.
Oh, wow. Nice.
Yeah. And we were on tour, and he was handing out flyers to the school for the percussion program. And my mom was working the souvenir booth. And so he went up and said, here's some flyers. And she took one. She goes, my son's a drummer and this and that. He's really, really good. And he's like, yeah, right, lady. Okay, he's really good. So she took the flyer. She comes running to the bus. Here, take this. So I took the flyer, reached out to him. And I was looking at schools as I was like a junior in high school. And then we drove down, and I saw how great of a program it was. And like, I was always used to kind of being like the best drummer in my area or in my school or whatever, or one of the best. So I wanted to go somewhere that I was going to get my butt kicked. And I went down there and saw that percussion ensemble. Everybody is playing everything. One guy went from marimba to vibes to drum set to timpani to this. I'm like, I got to do this. This is where I need to be. So I went, and it was the best decision I ever made.
And you graduated, you moved back to the city, New Jersey area?
I went 5 years and got a master's in 1 year. So I got my master's in music, ed, and secondary ed. And I got involved in everything. I was in the jazz, in the main jazz band, and I was also in jazz vocal ensemble, which was really cool. We were doing like Manhattan Transfer stuff and Al Jarreau stuff, and just really cool vocal, arrangements and stuff. So that was a lot of fun. So when I got back home, and then I did some local musicals there. I did like some of the school musicals, and then I found some regional theater, started to get my feet wet and reading charts and doing some local theaters stuff. Yeah. And then came home back to Jersey, and I basically taught high school 1 year. Like, I came home like, all right, I got to make some money. So I had my degree. I got a high school band director assistant job for a year. But this is where it gets really fun. I would teach school till 3, 4 o'clock, whatever, come home, eat, get in my car, drive to the city and study at Drummers Collective. And I would take a master class. The classes there usually didn't start till like 6 o'clock, something like that, 6:30 to 10 or whatever. So I'd go there 2 or 3 nights a week and take like studio drumming or Afro-Cuban, or study with Frankie Malabe, the Duca de Fonseca on Brazilian music, and Rob Weiner on Brazilian music. And Ricky Sebastian on New Orleans stuff. And I would just take lessons and take classes and really just continue my drum set studies, but I was still making money teaching and stuff too. So it was good. So I could make it happen. But my dad really was helpful. He supported me. He said, man, this is a continuation of your education. I'll help you out and this and that. So that was a blessing. My parents are always a big support and a blessing. So yeah, that's where I first met Rob Wallace and those guys. And then I started teaching at the Collective. When that started happening, that's when I left teaching high school. When I got there, they had really kicked it into gear. They had been around, I think, since 77-ish. By the time I got there in like 85, it was really, pretty full blown, you know what I mean? By mid to late 80s, it was really doing great. And I was a puppy, man, I was still learning, you know what I mean? So it was on 14th Street and 6th Avenue above the McDonald's. Anybody that's ever been there remember the smell of the elevator going up, smelling the French fries, but and other things. But so it was cool though. But it has now changed, and I took lessons there, and from there, Rob Wallace, who had started DCI Music Video, there are some of the early music videos, instructional videos. And he knew I was in drum corps. And this is a funny story too. And I think, Rob, if you're watching, you'll remember it and appreciate this. I was leaving. We were leaving at the same time. We both got in the elevator, and he goes to me, just turns and says, hey, your rudiments pretty well, don't you? I said, well, I mean, yeah, no problem. I was in drum corps and college and all that. He goes, do you want to shoot a video on the rudiments? I said, okay, sure. The elevator opened up. He goes, all right, talk to you tomorrow. And I started planning for it, and we shot snare drum rudiments down at NFL Films down in South Jersey, and it was one of their best-selling instructional videos like ever. It was like Steve Smith, the two Steve Gads, I think Louis Belson, and mine. There was like 5 or 6 out. Yeah, it was cool, man, to get mailbox money at 24, 23,
You still getting those checks or?
Not on that. No, that's long gone. But, but that sort of that was sort of my first exposure to things, and from a business standpoint and professional standpoint, learning about like the industry. Like I was like, now I'm in the industry, so I started teaching at the Collective eventually as well.
The mid 80s in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
I was in DC during that time in college. I've heard stories about the late 60s, 70s, and 80s, and how much work there was and the opportunities that were afforded to musicians at that time. Were you the kind of person who would go to Mikkel's and Sweet Basil? And
yeah, I absolutely.
So what was the scene like back then for you? Were you doing a lot of sessions? Were you playing clubs? Like, what was the vibe like?
Well, I was definitely still, like I said, I was still a puppy. So I was breaking in. So Wecca was a little older than me and he got to start. He was on the scene. He was playing Mikkel's. I saw Steve Gadd play Mikkel's all the time. And we go see Dave. I played there a bunch with a few different artists. A guitar player, Jeff Chiampa. We played there a bunch with Frankie Malabé on percussion, Lincoln Goins on bass. And Mikkel's was man, if you didn't hang, you had to go to Mikkel's and hang. It was really great and great music all the time. George Benson used to play there all the time. What else? 7th Avenue South was like huge hang. That was the Breckers Club. Randy and Michael Brecker's place down on 7th Avenue. It was called 7th Avenue South. Another great hang. And at that time, I started studying with Peter Erskine. And I met him at the Collective, but then I started studying with him privately at his apartment. He was on 23rd Street. And, we'd go and have an hour lesson, and we would always go over. And like I could swing, obviously I could play jazz, this and that, but he really broke me down into my time playing, focused me in. And so I started to feel a lot more confident. But I think the scene was good, but changing. It was on the cusp of drum machine stuff, but a lot more clubs, a lot, like I said, 7th Avenue South, Mikkel's, Lone Star Roadhouse, Visiones.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Man, there was, it's probably more than Sweet Basil. I saw Art Blakey there with Sweet Basil at Sweet Basil many times, got his autograph on my album, Live at Sweet Basil. So yeah, it was, a lot of great. It was a lot of places. You pick up the Village Voice and you're just like, oh, who's playing tonight? It's like bing, bang, boom, boom, boom. Oh, wow. And it was everywhere you can go hear music. This was mid to late 80s. I'd done a couple of jingle stuff. I started to get into that. So I used to go up to Radio Registry and stuff and make sure they had my number and all this and stuff. So that was getting into the union and learning about that. But I will say that I took a master class with Chris Parker. If you know who Chris Parker is, guys, he's in this issue of Modern Drummer. Finally, he's been in many times over the years. He is somebody I looked up to because I would see his name on records all the time. Chris came in and did a master class at the Collective. And he comes in, he's like, he got this big case, man, and he opens it up and takes out this thing, puts it on a table. And we're like, what? And he goes, gentlemen, this is the next thing for studio musicians, meet the future. And he had a Lindrum. He was one of first of few many. And I'm sitting here looking at this mug like, I'm trying to get in the scene and you're trying to tell me my scene is over before it even starts. And you know what I mean? That was like, the drum machine. I was like, what the actual hell is that, man? I mean, are you kidding me? He goes, all of my sessions, a lot of sessions I do now are programming and this and that. I was like, oh man. But it was different. It started changing. There was definitely, I think, more live. I mean, I'm not the guy to ask 100% because I wasn't doing a ton of sessions even before that happened. But I could tell you that Chris was definitely all about the Lindrum. I guess the next step for me, like I started getting into Broadway, which I guess a lot of people didn't really know that part of that side of me. But when I was a student at the Collective, right before I started teaching, I took classes with Hank Jaramello, who was, a pretty legendary guy himself. He did Gino Vanelli records, but also, a bunch of jingles and Broadway. And he was a great sweetheart of a man, great teacher, and an excellent player, man. Really, really spot on. And I was taking a master class with him there, or a private lesson. He used to bring in a reel-to-reel with tracks of jingles that he did. You know how bulky and heavy stuff was back then. He'd bring that stuff in and he'd have his room all rigged, ready to go for his lessons. And you put the headphones on and you actually felt like you was in the room, in the studio doing it. Oh, here's a Cheerios commercial, or here's this and there's that. You'll hear a click stick clown off and then start, and you'd have to sight read it. Man, I'd be like nervous as heck, because he really puts you in the situation of you have to do it. You can look at it down, you get one pass through, and then we're going for a take. And he would do it like that with you. So, and I did a bunch of stuff. And then one of the lessons, he put up the book for a chorus line, because Hank was one of the drummers. Dorian McGee was the main drummer, and Hank was a walker.
Explain what a walker is.
I was waiting for you to ask me that. Now, listen, I'm not going to sit here and say I'm an expert in knowing the ins and outs of what that is, but I do know that every theater had to have a minimum. I think still does. I'm not necessarily sure, but every theater had to have a minimum. And if they didn't, then you'd have to bring in the musicians anyway, and they get paid for only playing however many shows. But they had to be paid in, because the house had to employ so many musicians, right? So he's called a walker. He put up I Hope I Get It in one of my lessons. And so we started, doing it, and he had the headphones on, and we're going through it. And it was, if you know a chorus line, and if you know I Hope I Get It, you know that it's going from then some breaks and, and breaking down and, ups and downs and all over the place, right? Really cool stuff. So I went through it a few times, and, it's like, yeah, man, it was good, and he was like, listen, you think, why don't you come watch the show with me one day? Would you like to do that? And I was like, yay, absolutely. I'd love to do that. It wasn't even processing for me about that. I mean, my head was at like McKell's, like where I was going after my lesson. You know what I mean? That's where my head was. And he was like, well, come check it out. It's like, all right. So I met him at the stage door, to Schubert and stuff. And I was like, wow, this is for real, for real. So walked in, and it was definitely unimpressive. Definitely not what I thought it was going to be when I got in there, the older theater, and not 100%, not real clean and whatever. It was, see little.
Oh my God, really?
Oh yeah. It's kind of like that.
Because I guess they had been there for a while by that
Yeah,
time.
they had been there. Well, they started downtown, and then they moved up there. I guess I don't know my history that good, but 70s. So now we're talking, we're into 80, we're into the late 80s by now. So I watched the show, he crammed me in. I sat down and put headphones on and watching, and he killed it, like so spot on. And I was like, man, this is great. And he was Broadway. Wow, this is cool. This is badass. And then after the show, he was like, hey, what'd you think? I said, man, you sounded amazing. And everything was so spot on and this and that. And goes, well, what do you think? You think you may want to could you do this? You think you may want to, play the show? And that was a fork in the road moment for me. And I think most musicians get that fork in the road moment at some point. So I say, yes, I'm all in, and I better learn it. If I say no, I'm probably not going to be breaking into the scene, right? I guess my lesson to everybody would be, even if you're not 100% sure in your abilities or what have you, you're relatively sure, you're relatively confident. Nobody knows what the future is. You got to do it, man. You got to jump in, because that's what propels you to learn the music, and that propels you to get better. That propels you to be prepared to go in and do the gig. It's really not different. It wasn't much different from college, to be perfectly honest, because in college, I had to prepare my percussion ensemble music and prepare my jazz ensemble. I had to go in ready to go, or else I'd get, chewed out or, whatever, or not a good grade. And I'd let everybody else down, which is like the more important, right? Other than the fact that you get chewed out, that you'd let your other musicians down. So for me, once I commit, I'm all in. So I said, yeah, man, I'd love to, and there was no turning back at that point.
So what did you do to prepare to sub at a chorus line?
Those guys had all been there, and I was young. So it was my first time playing, show like that. So Hank said, okay, come get the book, and you start sitting in and to watch. There was no, here's an MP3,
No conductor cam video.
No conductor cam, bro. No conductor. So I walk in with my cassette player every show and like 4 or 5 tapes. And he'd go to me like, he'd go, okay, you could stop it now, because if there's a, like the long Paul scene or whatever, and you're cut, then he'd go, okay. So press the record. And so I got my pit tapes, man. I got to turn you on to them. It's a trip.
Oh,
so
wow.
I have some pit tapes. He said, anytime, you just let me know. It's no problem. You just come in, let me know. So I marked up the book a little bit here and there in my book. And the conductor was Alphonse, his father Alphonse. And he was an actual priest. Some of you guys have been around a minute. You'll remember Father Alphonse. And then they had Jerry was the assistant conductor. So this is, you have to play for everybody. So when you're ready, you let them know. But see, at that time, the actual drummer had to be there with you the first time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, at least that was what happened with me. And I think other guys got the same thing, just in case things didn't go well.
Mm.
And now I had to go after Hank. I had to meet Dorian, and I had to sit in with Dorian and watch him do it, because he was really the main drummer, and Dorian, he's a good guy. He was definitely very serious and great pocket. So so I just said, all right, when I was ready, and I spoke to the conductor, Father Alphonse, and this and that, and so I just played the show, and everything was cool. I could still remember it. I think I have the tape in my house, but it was a great moment. It was a fun moment. I mean, it's a legendary show, and it's just, it still gives me goosebumps listening to some of that stuff, because it's so iconic, man. And it really tests your ability. You got to play fast samba. You got to do that. You got to groove, rock ballad, kiss the day goodbye. I mean, you got to pocket, you got to play odd times. You got to play 2-beat, got to play brushes. So it, really test your skill set. It was really good training for me, and it's great to be part of that legend. And I played all the way up to the last show. And
oh, wow.
I did not play the last show. Hank played the last show.
Did you see a career playing musicals, or were you really focused on, playing the more contemporary music at the time?
Both.
Playing...
At that point, I was like, I just dove in whatever came my way. And I was going to do whatever I had to do. I worked a telemarketing job if I had to. That was the thing back then. There was a lot of musicians jumped up there on 23rd Street or 20th Street or one of those. There was this big telemarketing office. So I looked through the Village Voice. Well, I'm going to be in town teaching here or there, but I got a break and I got to make some money. Then I got show at night. Man, I hustled, man. Just hustled, did what I had to do, make whatever money I had to make. I was teaching at the Collective, but that started, it was a little slow, but and you get, one thing here, one thing there. And I wasn't like on the road touring or anything. So I was doing that. And then I was doing Grease. So between those 2 shows, then I did do, there was not a bus and truck. It was like at a playhouse in Pennsylvania, a version of a chorus line. So it was funny because I was out there doing it, staying there the whole run. It was like 2 months or whatever. But then some weekends, like Dorian would call, say, hey man, I need you tomorrow. So then I had to get a sub for my thing, and I would go in and drive into New York, play his, and then whatever. So it was fun though. It's like that's it. When you're in your early 20s, that's what you do. You're just hustling, trying to make a living. And meeting other musicians and playing. But for me, since I lived in Central Jersey, I go to New York, but I also was working in Philly,
playing gigs in Philly. And
yeah, playing gigs. And that's
wow.
how I met this guitar player Ed Hamilton, who I did like 4 or 5 records with him, and Gerald Beasley, the bass player, is in the band, Doc Gibbs on percussion, and then Jose Rossi on percussion, who used to be in Weather Report, who was in Patti LaBelle's band. And we did a few records, but we played a lot in Philly, New Hope, Jersey, Baltimore, Blues Alley. What happened was I had met Jose, and I didn't know I knew his name from Weather Report. He was on the Procession record and I think Domino Theory. And so we started playing together. We hit it off great because remember, I'd studied with Frankie Malabé, so I was very in tune with a lot of the Afro-Cuban rhythms, the Puerto Rican stuff, the Mozambique stuff, all of that. So we hit it off really well. So we played a bunch of gigs, and that's when he recommended me for Patti's band. Yeah, that was a big process.
So when did you start playing with Patti LaBelle?
So now we're talking early to almost mid 90s. That's my 94.
Was it a tour or was it certain spot dates?
It was spot dates. Yeah. And what happened was John was the drummer before me. John Paris, I believe, was her drummer, and he left, and that's when the audition happened. You want to hear about that story?
Yeah. Was she there when you were auditioning?
Dude, and everybody out there, you think that you may be ready for an audition, but you haven't had an audition like what I'm about to tell you. I get a message from him, and then her management, okay, be at the warehouse in Philly at X time, right? For the audition, and bring your drums, right? Like, bring my drums. I thought it was going to be down on Girard Avenue in Philly at Sigma or something, rehearsal spot, bring your drums. So I brought my drums, got there plenty early. I think it was, I don't know what time, 2:00, 2:30, nobody there, 3:00, nobody there. I'm like, oh my goodness, I know I'm in the right spot. This is pre-cell phone, pre all of that stuff, right? Then I see Jose rolls up, other people rolling up, let me in. I was one of the first drummers there. So there was no soundproofing. This is big empty warehouse, and one stage for the drums. So since I got there first and early, I got the stage. 4 of the guys show up with their drums.
Oh no!
Oh, it gets better. So one on each side and one on each side. So now there's 5 of us in the warehouse. I'm on the stage, and then 2 on this side and 2 on this side. Right. So, we're setting up, talking, we're jamming, and right, the bass players coming in, we're playing. And then Bud Ellison, who was her MD, keyboard player, walked in. He's rest in peace too. But so we're all we don't know what's going on next. So he's like, all right, we're all getting ready just to walk out. We figure he's going to bring us in one at a time. Right. He goes, no, everybody stay here. Everybody sit down. Thinking we're just going to get directions or something, right? He goes, okay, we're going to start with Lady Marmalade. And I'm sitting here saying, we're all not going to play this song together. Surely he's not going to ask us to do that, right? He goes, all right, we're going to start with Lady Marmalade. You play the kick part. You play the snare part. You play the hi-hat part. You don't do nothing. And when I point to you, you just give me a fill.
What? How did it go?
1, 2, and I'm like, okay, bass drum part. Snare drum part, the guys are going tap, 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 right? So, the beat is real specific. Mm-hmm. So it was a little bit of chaos. And so like 2 or 3 of the guys basically told them to leave right after that. Anyway, well, because a couple of them were like laughing, at what he was telling them to do. Because let's face it, it's a little silly, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he was the MD. So what do? You do what you're told. So he was trying to test us right out of the gate who was going to follow the direction, no matter how stupid it was. He was trying to see who was going to vibe him, who was going to say this is stupid, and this is a great way for him to say who knows the part and who doesn't, who's prepared and who isn't. If you don't know the part, you can't do that. You can't do what he told you to do. If you don't know where the open hi-hats are and all that stuff. And it was dumb. It was really dumb. But it was his way of eliminating 3 of the 5 people that were there.
Wow.
That's crazy.
You wind up finishing the song by yourself, basically?
Right after he stopped and he pulled us in I think me and one other guy was left, and we just did it one at a time. We played some more tunes, and then I got the gig.
And how long were you working for her?
It really wasn't long. It wasn't even a year, I don't think. Just again, it wasn't a tour. She was in between records. Just a bunch of spot dates. So it wasn't a whole lot. It was, a bunch of shows. I didn't even have time to get a tech. I mean, there was whatever. It was whatever shows they had there, whatever kit there was there, or if I needed something, I would just put my request in and it would be there, and it was no problem. And we did all states, Chicago, LA, a few different places. So it wasn't wasn't a big tour or anything, because what had happened was I got married while I was playing with Patti, and went on my honeymoon. True story. Went on my honeymoon to Hawaii, and back in the day, you're checking your voicemail. Check my voicemail. Jose calls, "Yo, Pat, man, I'm trying to get a hold of you. The tour is starting in a week or so, and we're going to start rehearsals. Like, where are you? So I was on my honeymoon. So, I called him and I said, yeah, I'm not, I'm on my honeymoon. So I don't want to get divorced before I'm even married. So I can't do it, So because Jose was playing with Robert Palmer. So he got Donnie Wynn to do it. And then right after that, that's when John Blackwell. Then Blackwell got the gig, yeah.
Oh, that's fascinating. When you're playing with Patti LaBelle, well, if anybody's ever seen Patti LaBelle live, there's a few things that she does. She has this wail that she does, starting from here and going way up. But she also does this thing where she's so into it, it's like she's in church and she kicks off her shoes. Did you ever have to catch that?
No, I never caught it. But she would sound check and it'd be one level, and then we get in the show and she's blowing out side fills. So and following, and this is where the Broadway training helped, to be honest, because Bud, the MD, was literally a conductor and performer. So he'd be playing acoustic piano. So you're following cues and head cues. He had a great way of communicating things. So if he wanted you to do a build-up, he'd go like this, like with his hands, like that would be an eighth note build-up, and he'd go like this. And he wanted to build up. Okay, there's the eighth note build-up. Then if he wanted triplets, he'd go like that. So you're following and then he's going like boom, and then you boom, boom, whatever, So you're following hand cues. You're following, and she, like you say, a lot of times she'd ad lib, so she'd be up something, and then she'd want to bring it down and bring it down and bring it down, so and blop and bring it down, and then and if you go to cross stick too soon, he'd be like, no, Okay. Then he'd just go like this. And I'm looking, it was the first time she did that. I'm looking at Jose. We were playing, I think, in LA at the Forum or someplace, or I don't know. It was in LA though. I remember this. And I'm looking, I'm like, what the heck is he doing? Do I stop? Like this, he's going. And I'm like, I feel like I'm in the pit in Broadway or something. He's going like this. And he goes like this. Put it in your pocket. And he walks away. Like, what do I do with that? He wanted you to fade out. And then she starts talking to the audience and stuff like that. But you would think he would have told or said, okay, well, sometimes this is what we're going to do. I left it right then and there.
When you were playing a chorus line, and then you started getting into other shows like Grease. Was that a recommendation from someone at a chorus line, or just you went up to somebody who was, I don't even know who the drummer was at Grease back then?
It was Norbert Goldberg. And I met Norbert, I think, because I think he subbed the chorus line too, and then he got the Grease gig or something to that effect. So that's I started subbing for him, and he's just a beautiful, great, wonderful person. And if you're listening, Norbert, thank you. I love you, man. He's a great guy. It was a great show, and it was. I mean, that's when they started having a bunch of guests and all that. I know they've had a couple different incarnations of the show, but real fun. I guess a lot of it is recommendation, but I can tell you, getting back to the Broadway thing, that in my experience, I feel as if that the networking with other drummers, while important, is not as important as meeting conductors and assistant conductors and piano players. Not that the drummer is going to listen to the bass player or guitar player, but I learned, I guess, that the conductor had a lot to say with who the drummer is, and the conductor had everything to say with who's first call and like thumbs up, thumbs down. Obviously, as you know, I don't know if it still is that way. To getting back to that chorus line thing, was after I played the first show and all that, and Father Alphonse, and I, got the thumbs up, the assistant had his drummer that he liked. So even though, Alphonse said, call Pat, if he's not available, then call da 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 da. The other guy said, well, no, I like this guy. So whenever he's conducting, if he was a sub, he'd say, no, I'd like this guy. So there's all of that stuff that is so jive in so many ways. But at the same time, it happens, man. It's reality. So I had learned early on to if you're going to be in this thing, you better get a thick skin really quick, between getting notes, like some guys can't take notes, and no matter what it is, somebody's going to give you a note because you're a sub. They're just going to give you a note. So shut up and take the note and just say, oh man, sorry. Okay, got it. Will do. And even if you write down hello, mom on your chart, I don't care what you put, but put something on there that says you took note of what that dude just told you, and take it to heart, because it's the way it is. And it's following direction. It's having a thick skin. And even if you don't, there's no room for what you think as a sub, obviously, but, and then, I've never had my own show, so you could speak to this in a much bigger sense. Even if you don't feel it musically is correct, and they tell you to do it, as a drummer, you may think this is all right, I'll do it, but this is not, you don't sit there and go, okay, I guess I'll do it. I mean, that's not what you do. You just do it. Even if your every fiber of your drummer being says this is stupid, you just do it. I mean, that's not, somebody else has a different vision than you. They're seeing it different. They're looking at it and hearing the song or the music from a different perspective.
I think it all goes back to the Patti LaBelle audition.
Oh, dude.
If you think it's stupid, there's probably a reason why it's done that way. So
could be. No, absolutely. And I feel as if the training and watching and being, what we used to call, I don't know if you still do, is, have you ever been under a stick? Like, have you ever followed a conductor? And a lot of pop people who are in that realm who want to get into Broadway or jazz, they've never been under a stick because they either never went to college or never had that opportunity to follow a conductor as a drum set player. That's like, what do you mean? I'm in control, not him, or whatever. That's one of the things. Have you ever been under a stick before? And so, and yeah, nobody was really hands. There was really a lot of guys use sticks. So, and no clicks really until I think when I subbed for Clint a lot with Footloose was one of the first times I had to use triggers and change kits and all that stuff, which was fun and a learning process. There is one story I'd like to tell, which goes back to a chorus line. You had asked me a while to come up with some things about subbing and experiences that may have happened as I was learning the show. That there's other guys that are constantly trying out. That may not be the case these days, I'm not sure, but there's always guys wanting to break in and try in and do a show. I learned of a situation that had happened whereby this guy wanted to sub the show, who is no longer with us, sadly, was a really, was a good jazz drummer and known primarily probably as a jazz drummer, fusion drummer. This drummer went in and watched, and a few times, and he was ready. Went in to play the show and was not ready, and literally, and I hope I get it. He literally, it crashed and burned, which is why probably they had to have the regular drummer there. I don't know, but he just was not. He thought he'd probably just go in and semi-sight read it or took it lightly or whatever, and crashed and burned. Let that be a lesson. I mean, when you say you're ready, just be ready. Just really be more than ready. And listen, everybody makes a mistake, a little there, a little tempo rush, little drag, missed this. Oh crap, I missed this. I missed a little triangle, missed a bell, drop a stick. I mean, we're not talking that. That happens to everybody. We're talking like you're in the wrong damn spot, or you have no idea where you are right now. That is not even gonna remotely, you want to kill your career before it starts, in this kind of thing. Because why now is in particular, there's too many really good younger drummers coming through college that's what they want to do. And I mean, this is it. I mean, people can read, they probably could go in and sight read it if they had to, or at least in a couple of days or whatever, but it's just not enough. The margin for error is very slim, That being said, I feel as if it's a lot easier these days to play so than it used to be, because you got, okay, bar 88, here we go. First time I was like, get the hell out of here. There's somebody telling me where to be. I was like, who would have thought that somebody was going to be, you have a safety net.
Tell me about Dreamgirls and you playing on that.
Yeah, well, I didn't do it on Broadway. I did a national tour when it was supposed to be coming back in the late 90s. So it was called Dreamgirls Are Back or something like that. And the jackets were really cool. They had Dreamgirls facing and it says we're back or something like that. I guess if you guys are listening to this, you're Broadway aficionados. So if you know Dreamgirls, you know that there's all kinds of lifts and there was all kinds of stuff going on in that stage. They didn't have that on the road. Okay. They were going to add all that lifts and all the stuff when they found a house and they got settled in. I mean, you couldn't be lugging all that stuff. So it was a kind of a strip, I hate to say strip down because that makes it sound like bus and truck. It wasn't like that, but it didn't have all the fireworks. So it got pretty good reviews. I mean, it was very good, very talented cast. I came into it after the drummer that was doing it got canned. And I hate to say that. So don't mean to come across as whatever, but when you're playing a show like Dreamgirls, or you're playing a show like Motown or Soul Train or a rock show, it has to be, you got to know that idiom and play it with authenticity and correctness. And you got to know you can't come from somewhere unless you've been there. You can't come from somewhere musically unless you've been there musically. And obviously this person really hadn't been there musically in that realm to perform that particular book. And as a drummer, more than any other instrument, it's the most important thing is the feel. That said, it wasn't the drummer's fault that he did that show.
Wow, what happened?
It was the person that hired him's fault.
Mm.
Why? Because he hired the wrong guy. You understand what I'm getting at? You can't blame somebody for not being able to do something they don't know nothing about. It wasn't his bag. It wasn't his thing.
So
every night it was proven that it was not happening.
In your career, you've had a lot of experience playing different styles of music.
Yes.
And you've studied different things. Have you gotten into a situation where you felt it wasn't your bag? You're like, you know what, this really isn't for me.
If I had to do a legit show, straight up, I studied percussion and can play mallets and could play timpani and all that. So I got called by a contractor early on in my career. Well, not early on, but after Chorus Line and Grease and a few others, to do a road tour of a show, but it was for percussion. And I said no. I said no because I knew I wasn't my bag. I knew that I'd have to go rent a vibe. I'd have to start shedding. And at that time in my career, I had too much on my plate. I was teaching a lot. I was doing some sessions. I was doing drum set stuff. I didn't have time to go back and shed a vibe and bell and temp and rent and do all of that for potential gig on Broadway. Maybe. So I said no. Haven't really heard from that contractor again, but that's okay. I don't have a problem saying no. If it's not me, I don't have a problem saying no. But in terms of drum set, there's not much I have said no to, because I feel as if I've grown up and played and listened to a lot of kinds of music. Can I play fast double bass and play a metal gig? I don't think I'd ever be asked, but if I did, I'd say no. So
no, Ride the Lightning, the musical by Metallica. You wouldn't be doing that one.
That sounds interesting. No, but I would not be doing that. That sounds like could be an idea. But what came back to Dreamgirls, it wasn't fair almost. And what's weird about it is I got brought in on the DL. It was somewhere not too far. It was like somewhere in the Midwest, and I'm not going to name names. The bass player told somebody, either the conductor or one of the producers, that, and it was starting to get not great reviews. So he told him, listen, man, he's looking out for himself, because he doesn't want the show to fizzle out. Tempos were all over the place. Things were too fast. Whatever. So I come in, watched, sent me the book. I learned it, and I just showed up in St. Louis. You've been to St. Louis
I think
Fox?
I've just kind of no, I have not actually. No.
So that was my first. Fox in St. Louis is beautiful, like incredible, like old from the 20s. That was the first show, and right away I knew that, things were fast. You know what I'm saying? I mean, things are fast in that show. You got to do a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't got to be. And what happens is, when you're in a show like that, they're up there going crazy.
They're all out of breath.
Oh man, they're all kinds of out of breath. And a show like that, there's constant dialogue, constant singing, constant dancing. There's libretto. It's like, it's nonstop. It's an hour and 45, whatever. There's no stopping. The whole first act is like, woohoo, crazy. All tempos were too fast. All the actors are out of breath. So, and listen, I'm going to tell you straight, drummers, I don't know if I'm not telling you to do this, but the conductor counts off right before, and I'm telling you, before that, there's the bone, don't, and I'm not going, don't, all that stuff, right? That part I was telling you about, when I got there, I was like, and I looked at my buddy, I was like, oh no. Mm-mm.
Wow.
That's not happening. And he's looking at me going, and I'm like, no, I'm not doing it. Not doing
it.
So
did you take?
I knew the record, dude. You know what I'm saying? Like, I knew the record. And that's why they brought me in.
You straightened it out, basically.
Straightened it out. Mind you, we're on the road, so we got plenty of time to talk about this stuff. Sorry. I would never do that if I'm a sub or if I'm on Broadway. Obviously, that's not my role. But in
that is correct.
In this situation, is completely different, because the bass player, the keyboard player, and they hired the rest of the band local, the horn players and stuff. We're all like screaming for help, basically. You know what I'm saying? Because they were out on an island with the conductor and the drummer. So that being said, things started getting, and when things are right, as you meet the cast, oh, you're the new drummer? Oh, thank you, Jesus.
Yep.
Oh, thank God. Oh, thank you. Oh, thank you. Now listen.
They give you a hug. You don't even know who they are.
I'm saying, listen, guys, drummers out there, you have a responsibility to the music, and this environment in particular in a show, the feel is everything. And, again, if I was subbing a show, the thumb is, I'm not going to do that, but this is a work in progress. This thing was trying to get back, do this tour to get ready for Broadway. You got to work this stuff out on the road, and now fix it now, get with the conductor, and I have to say, to wrap up the Dreamgirls thing, which actually stalled out in upstate New York, and there wasn't a house, and that never happened. So there's that. So we never did come back. That being said, we played the Wilshire in LA for like, I don't know, it wasn't quite a month. It was a couple, 3 weeks. Henry Krieger was there, a few shows. By that time, things were definitely starting to click. Things were starting to really start to feel good. Shows coming together, tempos are getting right. Parts up, dancers, everything was coming together. There was a percussionist, I think her name was Vanessa. I forgot her last name. She was the percussionist for the show. And I think she did it on Broadway. I think. Or she did the LA version. I think. She was like, from rehearsal one, we hit it off like crazy. Like, this feels great. This is so good. This is right. Feels good. You know what I mean? That's when you're in the right spot with this. But then when Harold Wheeler comes down and peeks over and goes, rhythm section, you guys are killing it. It's great. It's really good. Thank you. I'm like, all right, awesome. And then we saw Henry Krieger back, and he was like, he loved it. He absolutely loved it. Those are the people you got to please. Those are the people the conductor has to please. I was just fortunate to be part of that, playing that music, and it was a highlight. I loved it every night. I loved it.
Let's fast forward to Newsies. You subbed there. Was that for Paul Davis?
Yep. Paul was one of my students.
Oh, really?
Paul, I love Paul. Such an excellent drummer and just a great, great guy. Mm-hmm. Paul had been studying with me for a minute. We started working on some different things with 2-beat and then incorporating some of the march stuff. He was explaining to me kind of what was happening in this and that. Can you help me? It's like, yeah, man, so I have to come up with this. There's this whole march kind of thing. And, with kicks, and I got to, sound like a drum line and fills and stuff. So I gave him a bunch of ideas and stuff. And he ended up incorporating it into the show. He was like, man, would love to have you sub. I thanks for everything that this and that. It's like, that's cool. That's, I felt as if I didn't ask him. He didn't have to, you know what I mean? But I was like, dude, I'd love, of course, I'd love to do it, man. Be an honor to go in there and, do the show and help you out. And so it was great. It was a fun show, man, and incorporating some Phil ideas that I showed him and stuff. It was fun. So, but it was another great, like, I always just tend to do like the groove shows for some reason. I guess what I gravitate towards.
So over the years, you've had several different projects. You've done several videos for Drumeo, I suppose. Yeah. And you have behind you to your left is a practice pad that you showed to me when you came to watch me play at Ain't Too Proud. And that's a very unique drum pad.
Yeah.
Tell me more about that.
That's the P4 practice pad that I designed. It's available anywhere now online, or it's available at drumeo.com. So when I was teaching at Drummers Collective, I was teaching a master class, or no, just a normal class that I teach. I think it was a rudiment class or something. So I was playing on an HQ real feel. And then I took another pad because I was demonstrating some coordination movement, how you can orchestrate it. I took another pad and I kind of moved it over here. So I had two different levels. I had one here and one here, So my entrepreneurial brain starts going. And I'm like, man, there's never been a dual layer practice pad before. Every practice pad in the world is one surface, one level. Just flip it over if you need to have a different surface. Like, what if I had like so listen, this is the 12-inch, this is a lot, you know? So what if half the pad was normal and the other half was like a different surface? So I started messing around different, getting different rubber things. My brother's like an amateur woodworker guy, so we came up with some prototypes. And my initial design was square, and I went from, just getting the inches, went from 2 levels to 3 levels. With a high, this is sort of more like a hard rubber for like a cymbal. This is soft like a floor tom. This is medium, and that's your normal gum rubber. So it's like playing like on a little mini drum set. You can hear your articulation. You can separate cascara or jazz ride or whatever you're doing. So I've been with Ludwig now for a long time as an artist. So I went to NAMM, a while ago now. It's over 10 years. And I met with the then general manager, showed it to him, and he was like blown away, like, holy crap, what is this? And I explained, and he goes, well, what if, Ludwig hasn't had a practice pad in a long time. Why don't we put this with our engineers and try to come up with something? So we did. So he rounded it out, and we came up with different things. And they had it manufactured in Japan. It's all okay. It did all right. I had like a 2-year, 3-year contract. When the contract was up, I was like, all right, you guys aren't really working it that great, because it was with the band and orchestra division, not the other division, and they didn't really know what they were doing with it. So I need to take it back and license it somewhere else, or get it. I want to get it made here in the States, which now it's made in Kentucky, where I went to college, actually, in Moorhead, Kentucky. I found a manufacturer there. That being said, so then I after I found this other manufacturer, I put a Facebook post out that I'm reissuing the P4 practice pad. And Jared from Drumeo messaged me and said, hey, let's talk about this. What is that? What is that thing? So I showed it to him, explained it to him, and says, well, why don't we do a licensing thing with you and call it the Drumeo P4 practice pad? So I said, all right, I'm cool with that. Let's do a trial run. He says, well, let's do a limited run. We released it. 1,000 pads would be available at midnight, January 1st, whatever it was, 2007, or I don't know, something like that, 2008. They sold out in about an hour. So once those were done, he said, let's come up with this plan. And then we went out and shot a bunch of videos. So it's out, it's available, but it just came out of necessity, just invention. I'm just thinking about stuff, just creating new stuff. And I have a ride cymbal with Zildjian called the Organic Ride. It's 21-inch organic ride. It's been out for over 10 years. It's one of their better selling ride cymbals, real versatile. Can crash, got a great bell. We're working on a 19-inch crash ride organic right now. It's been about a year or two where we're still working on it. I have two new products. One new product is actually going to drop real soon. By the time this comes out, it may actually be out. So if you go to patpdrummer.com, you will see all my products that I've designed.
In addition to people like Patti LaBelle and Gloria Gaynor, you play with Oz Noy, you have a album out, which is fantastic. It's called
Thank you.
The Power Station Sessions. It's the Pat Petrillo Big Rhythm Band, and you have Nile Rodgers, John Popper, Oz Noy, Lenny Pickett, the wonderful Felicia Collins, and Glen Burtnik.
Yeah, he's a singer-songwriter, great guy. He sings one track on it, one vocal track. Thank you, man. It came out. It's been a year, and we've submitted for consideration for Grammy under contemporary instrumental album. By the time this is shown, voting will be over, but the announcement happens in November. So fingers crossed, we'll see. But yeah, I put the group together a few years ago. Our first album was the Abbey Road Sessions that we did at Abbey Road in Studio 2. We did a bunch of Beatles arrangements for a horn band. So it was a lot of fun, dream come true for me. So this one I wanted to make a little more New York centric, like records used to be cut back in the day, like I used to hear when I was in high school and grade school. And of course I wrote 48th Street, which is the title track, with Nile in mind, hearing that great rhythm. And I wanted to give him a little lead as well. So I wrote it with my buddy, Chris Fisher, who's now the keyboard player of Spyro Gyra. And we came up with a great tune. So Nile is on it. We have a video as well of that. Oz is on a few tracks. We did a cover of Black Cow. instrumental cover. And we did, he's on another original of mine called Global Warming, which is more of a weather report-y, fusion-y kind of tune. Felicia is on the rock tune we did called Asbury Days. So it's got a little bit of Jersey Shore, horn band vibe to it. We did Earth, Wind and Fire track Running. I have a little drum solo in that. It's not a drummy kind of, like, you're not going to listen to it and say, oh man, there's a lot of great drums. I mean, I'm playing for the song, I'm just playing what the song needs. It's a fun record, but it does harken back to those days at the power station, when they used to cut it just, raw, great grooves. We did a cover of Billy Joel's Big Man on Mulberry Street. And in talking to Liberty DeVito, I loved how the groove he played on that. And he says, you know what, we cut that at the power station in Studio C, where you're going to be at. And I'm like, well, this is a full circle moment. This is great. So you can get that on my site too. We're out of CDs. I do have some vinyl, and you can get it on any streaming platform. But it was a lot of fun. I really appreciate you bringing that up. It's been a fun year, and for me, in a lot of ways, a lot of good things.
So if people want to find you, where can they find you on social media, TikTok, Snapchat?
Yeah, I'm on
website.
Pat P Drummer is my Instagram handle, as well as my website, because people tend to not spell my last name right. So Pat P Drummer on Insta, and I'm on Facebook, but I'm on TikTok, but I don't really use it as much. So it's, the band has been a great vehicle for me I just want to play, I've done so many instructional videos and this and that, and showed all the licks, I whatever I can play, you already have seen out there. So I just want to make music. I was thankful to the cats from Modern Drummer for interviewing me, and
yes, and you were on the cover of Modern Drummer. By the way, it's the last thing I got to say is, for myself, growing up, having subscribed to Modern Drummer since like 1970, I know it came out 78, but I was a subscriber like 1980, and I would get every single issue, and I had them up to like 1993 when I got here, and I had a whole bunch in a trunk at my parents' house. Then I brought them here. I gave them all away, but I've always wanted to be in Modern Drummer, and I actually was in it at one time when you'd be able to write what you're doing. And I was in it for like one, but to be on the cover is a whole other thing. And you were on the cover. That's fantastic. In February, correct?
February issue of 2023. Yeah. It's, we started out with an interview because of the record with Mark Griffith. And, you never know how it's going to end up, and how long it's going to be. And then they started telling me, hey man, we need some more pictures. So at one of my gigs at the Cutting Room, Lloyd Bishop, who is the photographer for the Seth Meyers show, had him come in, and we did a bunch of great shots. He goes, listen, we need to get some good pictures, because this could end up, a cover story. So, it's like, whatever, if it happens, it happens. And they did it. And it was like, wow, I appreciate it. I've been doing this for a minute, and it's nice to I've had a lot of experiences, and I'm grateful for that, for sure. I mean, it's nice to have somebody recognize what you do. You're not playing in the big stadium band, but you're a working drummer who's done a lot educationally, as well as records and shows and different things. And I think I've instructed a lot of people, and I think people like what I do, and I'm really grateful for them for doing that. It was really a nice surprise.
Go check out this album, the Power Station Sessions. I was basically stuck on the song Running. It's an Earth and Fire song. He's killing it. He's killing it on this record. Check it out. I appreciate you taking time out of your day to talk to me about your Broadway experience, but also about how to follow direction, how to make sure that if you're going to audition for somebody, you just play the bass drum and you play the hi-hat.
Know the part that you're going to audition. That would be like going to audition for Metallica and not knowing Enter Sandman or something,
Great stories. I mean, we could go on and on and on, but
Yeah.
you know,
Thanks for having
to.
me, Clayton, man. It's been great to get to know you more and talk to you more. And good luck on your show. I hope it's a success and it happens on Broadway for you.
Thank you very much. We will talk soon.
Absolutely. Thanks, brother.